be alright.
Hi everyone, how you all going? Tonight I have with me Lola, Rushartland, and we're going to talk about, well, I guess when we spoke before, you described yourself as the midwife on the other end of life.
Yeah.
So let's just go back to like where you're from. You're from the Netherlands?
I'm from the Netherlands, yeah.
And in your life, you dealt with a lot of death.
Yeah.
Like lost a lot of people in your life?
Yeah, that sort of happened over time, but each of those situations has taught me a lot. All the things that you need to be a death midwife, as well as I've had my training, of course, but I feel that life has really taught me the most important things to come to this point, being a death midwife.
So you refer to yourself as a death midwife.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, which is pretty amazing when you think of a midwife, because you think of life. And then the death midwife is like it's the end of life.
Yeah, it's beginnings and endings. And,
Yeah.
and of course there's the term death doula and birthing doula. It's a term that is now more known and it's sort of gaining a bit of traction. But it's a new term and it's not something that people can really relate to, whereas a death midwife has already got a term in there, a word in there that people relate to. And yes, that is the beginning of life, but we have kind of forgotten how to die in this society, and there's such a great disconnect. And I think having a death midwife, and not just me, but my clients have also found that very helpful. Although after death they can no longer tell me how helpful it was, but
they could send a sign.
Yeah.
So if, so I guess too it could be very clinical in that sense, can't it? Like the dying process and how people go to the hospital and then they pass and you know, then you go to the room and they're all cleaned up and they're just sitting there, and then they go to the morgue and then they go to the funeral parlour.
Yeah.
And really at that stage, that's when people are not thinking too clearly and they're not making perhaps decisions that they might have wanted to make or had alternatives, you know, to deal with the situation. Yeah. So I guess the one thing I was talking to you about is your culture in the Netherlands, and your culture about like embracing death is a lot different than ours. I mean, we're just kind of catching up to all this and looking at the fact that we have got options. We can make it a beautiful thing that we share.
And it's not something that is actually known a lot of the time. Therefore, what you don't know, you don't know. And so these things happen and people kind of muddle through. And we're, you know, there's about 5% of the time that we're in front of the services, you know, the doctor, the oncologist, specialist of some other kind, whereas 95% there is that time where you are muddling through yourself. And so to have someone like myself there, it means that, well, we tend to the tears, the fears, the regrets and the unfinished business, and it's not just a dying person, their family as well, children I do involve, and often you will find that it is the most beautiful and intimate time that people have have had for a very long time, once when the dying days come around. And I start to sort of draw these things out, and we develop you know, beautiful things that we can do together, the reminiscing, the buying of a book where we write things in, the organising of a living wake, and of course talking about a funeral, etc.
So a living wake.
A living wake.
So is that when someone knows they're dying and they decide to embrace it and celebrate it?
Yeah, and not just oh, we'll have a big party. Yes, there is that, but to also acknowledge that these are my dying days. I'm going to be going. I'm not going to be here anymore in another month or two, or even 2 weeks. You know, doesn't always come about that far before someone dies. And for others to acknowledge that rather than scooting around it and not naming the elephant in the room.
Yes.
That is a very important thing, and there are so many gifts in that too. You know, people bring photographs and can write a song or a poem or play a bit of music, and you know, there's all sorts of ways that you can honor that person and of course indeed have a party as well. But do not scoot around it and pretend that death isn't really part of life, because it is.
So do people like phone you and say, you know, I've only got a certain time and I want to look at the way that I'm actually going to leave this life? Like, so it's like, you know, fulfilling their wishes, is that basically?
Yeah, not always. I mean, sometimes people call me when they've just had a terminal diagnosis. Other times they kind of get to hear about me later on in the piece, or the family knows about me or has heard about me and finds me. Sometimes it is because they're really at a loss and struggling and grieving the fact that they are dying. You know, they have a young family and young children and they just don't want to die. Fair enough. And so we try and deal with that, and we try and make the time that they have got left as meaningful as possible. And we create meaningful rituals and ceremony and special things to do together. And I don't do them with them, I help them think about these things. And it needs to be very personal. You know, someone who is a chef can start, whilst they are still well enough, perhaps they can start cooking with the children and write the recipe down. And so when they go, there's a recipe book left behind, or, you know, special muffins every Sunday that can then be, that ritual of baking muffins can be some sort of a measuring stick for the children's grief later on, because every Sunday they want to do that, but then there is that one day that they go, no, we want to go to the beach. And that's where I go, there's a different, you know, a different thing. It is another step in the grieving process. They can let go of that ritual now, and then they will have it at Mum's birthday or her or Mother's Day. You know, if she was the chef, or you know, there's all sort of personal things that you can think of. Well, that I can think of and come up with to make memories and to make these things special.
So what, okay, well let's just go back to the Netherlands. And if someone passes, what do you normally do? Do you remove the body straight away, or what normally happens in your culture?
Well, I'm sure it's done. I mean, we have normal funeral directors, but up to half the funeral directors, at least 50% of the funeral directors, I have been told by the company who I buy the cooling plates of, they were telling me that more than half the funeral directors now have cooling plates available. And so
hang on a minute.
A cooling plate.
A cooling plate. Okay. What is a cooling plate?
A cooling plate is something that is about 1.2 meters long, 60 centimeters wide. It's stainless steel, and it is cold, like it's run by a tiny little fridge engine that I just, you know, it's connected by a hose, and you just pick it up each and carry it. So it's portable, and you place it on the bed, and the body rests upon the cooling plate. And so when my father died, for example, I rang the funeral director and I said, well, my dad died a few hours ago, could you come? And so Dad died at 4 o'clock, they trundled in at 11, and they had their bucket with things that you need to wash the body, and they said, well, have you got your own stuff, or do you want to use ours? Do you want our help, or will you do it yourself? So it's all very, and so we washed Dad, and they asked, where do you want the cooling plate? And so the plate went in the tiny little bedroom, and that's where we slept as well. But for the next 4 days, Dad was there on the cooling plate. So we had time to sit with him and to walk in and have a chat to him and cry, and then there was, you know, there's a pot of soup on
So
the stove.
there's closure, isn't there, that way?
There's so much time, and you see the body change. And I'm not talking about, oh gosh, you know, they are deteriorating and decomposing in front of us. It takes the human psyche 3 days to fully understand, to fully get it, that someone has died. You can hear on the phone that your mum has died, or you see her die in the hospital. But then the body is taken away, and that's where your experience stops. Whereas if the body stays at home, you touch the body, you wash them, you oil them if you wanted to, you dress them, you do their hair, you might do their makeup. I only do makeup when they wore makeup, when they used makeup in life. You know, you may do their nails, and you no longer hear their voice, you no longer hear them breathe, you see them every day, and it's very different from a viewing.
Yeah, so how long does it, it's just a weird question, I guess, but how long can that body stay there on the cooling plate?
In New South Wales, a maximum of 5 days.
So there's a law, is there, that says, states that 5 days?
New South Wales is 5. Victoria, I am not aware of a law around that in Victoria, but New South Wales is 5 days. Yeah.
So that way you've got 5 days, basically, to say goodbye to someone.
Yeah.
And not only that too, I think, you know, like you hear so much where someone's passing, they're very unwell, they're in the hospital, and the families can't get there quick enough. So for them arriving after the death, that they can spend that time with them as well.
Yeah.
Whereas in a hospital, they're whisked away and put into the morgue. And
well, in a hospital, I pick up the body, or I organise for the body to be picked up and come home. So I deal a lot with sudden deaths as well. And even when there's a coroner involved, I get them home from the coroner, and then we still have a home vigil. And then I can organise the service. Often we have the service at home. If there's a big backyard or a property, we can have the service at home, and we can make our own coffin, or I get the coffin delivered, and then the hearse can pick up the coffin.
so make your own coffin.
Yeah.
People actually make their own coffin.
People make their own coffins. It's perfectly legal if
Wow.
you adhere to the rules and regulations, which means that, you know, it needs to be not over a certain size, and it cannot be, the coffin itself can't be heavier than 150 kilos. That's the max, but preferably lighter, of course, which it almost, well, so far I've not come across a coffin that heavy. And it has to be lined with plastic, which that's a New South Wales health regulation. Of course, with infectious diseases and with, well, we wouldn't have a body at home if there was an infectious disease. That for health regulations, we can't do that. But also there could be leakage, of course, technically speaking, that could happen. So the health regulations just state across the board there has to be a lining. But that could also be a corn sheet. So that is a waterproof sheet made from cornstarch, and so there is a more environmentally friendly way to do that. Yeah.
I mean, I find it really fascinating that there are alternatives.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a beautiful, I mean, it's full of sorrow talking about death, but to be able to look at another way of remembering someone. Because I have this picture in my mind of a family member who passed away, and I remember going to say goodbye to them in the hospital, and they had the blue hospital gown on, but they had this white paper thing with all this frilly bit, like a chook leg. That's what it looked like round their neck. And I just thought, that is the most ugliest thing I've seen. And what a horrible way to say goodbye and to have that memory.
Yeah, it is.
You know, so, I mean, I'm loving the fact that, well, I love the fact that I've met you and I now know about this. And I love the fact that I can share this information with my viewers so that you now know that there are alternatives, that, you know, someone that you love and adore can actually be at home with you for those 5 days. And, you know, and you've got that opportunity as a family, as a group, to be able to say goodbye and just to rejoice in the fact and make it I mean, it's never going to be a nice way, but
No,
it's a much nicer way of saying goodbye to someone.
There is a sacredness about that, to care for the body of your loved one. And I imagine you lose a child and then they're whisked away and that's it. And then you see them, at the funeral directors for half an hour or most an hour, and that's usually it. So the grieving process is hugely affected by such traumatic separation. Whereas if you get the time to be with them and to touch them and to sit around and to just, if it's enough, you walk away, but you can come back. And of course, you don't have to have them for 5 days. But I've only had it the other way around, that people said, okay, 12 hours then. And then by the end of the day, they would say, do you think we can have them overnight? And then in the end, we had them for 4 days or 3 days. But it's never been the other way around, that it was set up for 4 days and they asked for the body to be taken after a day.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I can imagine that feeling, where you just want to hang on to them more.
Yeah.
And like you say, it takes 3 days for the body or for the psychic to actually take in that information and know that you're not going to see them again.
Yeah.
That's it. So you've got 3 beautiful days. You can have your family over and just do it in such a beautiful way.
And to think about what it is that you want for the service, and it's not all that clinical. And you can readjust things with their hair or their makeup, and often when children are there, I have times when there's 2 or 3 kids, and I'll make sure that they make a plait in mum's hair, or the uncle or the sibling, or if there's hair enough, then so that before we close the coffin, I can cut a plait for each of them off.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I can sew that into a teddy bear for little ones, or make a string around it to hang above their bed, or they can paint mum's nails or dad's nails too. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's
right. For them to
be involved.
Around them. And it hasn't traumatized them. And the kids who used to love to do mum's makeup, well, they can do that now too. And children are much more accepting of death. And when I speak to them later on, I always stay in touch, and with some I've stayed in touch for a couple of years. And when I ask them, so how is that now? When you look back at that, just imagine we didn't have mum or dad at home. How would you have felt, do you think? Or has it been a good thing? Or how do you look back at that now? And they're always positive, saying I couldn't have imagined it to be any other way.
Because once upon a time it was, unacceptable for children to go to a funeral even. Like, oh no, you came away from there. Because they might ask questions.
Well, and see, I have in my practice as a counsellor, I have people who 40, 50, 60 years old, and they were not allowed to be at the funeral of their mum or dad, and they come and see me now, so many years down the track.
Yeah, they're dealing with that at a later age.
Yeah, and so then now, at this point in time, I help them create a service to actually grieve properly. And how sad is it that they were shut out of that? It's not a natural thing. If it was natural, it would be like this all over the world, but it isn't. There are cultures where children are very much part of it, and they're not traumatized. And the fear of death is a lot less as well. So therefore, fear of death is not, people say to me, oh, it's only a natural thing, isn't it? I mean, we're all scared of dying, but it's actually not true. Because there are so many cultures where people are not scared of dying. They see it as a part of life, which it is. So, yeah.
Do you, how do you have self-care for yourself? It must affect you going through what you go through, does it?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, how do you look after yourself? What's the thing that works for you in this situation?
Well, when I have an intense time with people and I end up being at their place for a week, before they die, and I organize the funeral. Once when that is done, I drive home and I cry all the way home, and I go to the beach for a couple of hours, or I go to the bush, because I need to come home to my 3 teenagers and 2 dogs and so on. So I need to sort of separate those worlds sometimes. And what else do I do? I make sure that I don't rent an office or anything. So what I give myself is every day I walk the dogs if I get the time. If I'm not working hands-on with the family, then I walk the dogs, I go to a cafe and get a cup of coffee and a muffin or something. So that's my renting an office. I take my iPad and all my emails and whatever I need to do, I do there. So that's a good thing for me to, there's a world out there that operates on a very different level, and most of the time people are fairly happy and joyous in a cafe situation, and it's little sort of a couple of hours of my office, and I spend a lot of time with my family. And
I just picked up then that you said that, like, if I've spent 9 days with them or
a week,
a week, or so that's happened. So is that someone that, like, they know that they've got a terminal illness and they know that they're dying?
Yeah.
So you would go and stay with them for that time?
At times. If there is family members and friends around and it's all well organised and it's all covered, then I might not be needed. But there are times where people are just, there's only 1 or 2 carers, and they just want me there because it gives them a sense of security, and also the person who is dying, they feel, well, Lola's done this quite a few times now, let's have her on board. There's been, there was on an occasion that there was a partner who said, look, I'm coping right now and I'm keeping it together, but I know when she draws her last breath, I'm going to freak out. Could you please stay? And so, that's my job. And I very happily do.
So you stay with them for however long they need you?
But for the duration of the dying days, and we never quite know, But there comes a point where I go, 3, 4, 5 days, but not a lot longer. And so we do a lot of sort of musical beds, and we're up when we're up and when we're needed, and then we nap for a couple of hours, and there's funny sleeping and eating routines, but we all pull through. And I often also use technology, as in Facebook, in that I form a group on Facebook that I have the people involved in the family and the person who's dying. I ask them who they want in the group, and so that becomes the support group. So,
okay, so it's a Facebook group that you create.
Yeah, but then no one, so it's a secret group, as in, not because it's got to be secret,
it's
but
just
that's
the
the
family
only
that's going
way.
through it.
It's the only way to make it so that no one else can just be added, so that it really is the choice of the family and the patient. So when it comes to the last few days, and the food in the fridge is getting low, and we need a few things cooked, then we can just flick a message on the group saying, hey, is there anyone who could do some shopping for us, or fill a script or something? It doesn't matter what. And if there is 15 people in that group, no one feels, it should be me, but there's enough people there to make sure that there's always 1 or 2 who go, I can do that. And people love to help, but they find it sometimes really hard to know what to do in such a situation. And therefore, if you have a Facebook group, flick the message, then they know what they can do. They can make.
Thank you, Facebook.
It's
So have you got a Facebook page yourself?
Yes, it's Crossings Paths of Death and Dying. There's also a Crossings page that is dead. It's, so Crossings Paths of Death and Dying, and there's my website, crossingswithlola.com.au.
Okay, so that's crossingswithlola.com.au. So if you want to get in contact, is that how they get in contact?
Yeah.
So if you want to get in contact with Lola, and even if it's just an inquiry as to, you know, might be just someone who's being inquisitive and wants to know or wants to plan something for themselves for the future, or how do they do it, or, you know, wants to know anything.
Anything they want to
Yep,
know.
anything.
And
Just get in contact with Lola. So
with Lola.
crossingswithlola.com.au.
And then there's my Facebook page, Crossings, Paths of Death and Dying, and that has got a lot of different articles that people might find interesting. And my workshop is coming up, another one, this weekend at Redhead, and so I run a 2-day workshop from Saturday morning through to Sunday night with an overnight optional. And that's also on my website. That takes you through everything we've just talked about, but on a personal as well as practical level. So you get to know how to care for a body and how to fill out an advanced life care plan, and how to be prepared to care for others, or what is it that you want yourself.
So you get to learn how to prepare the body and all that.
Yeah.
So through these workshops.
Yeah.
And you said something about a care plan?
Yeah, care plan, advanced life care plan. So at the end of life, but at any point in life, it is really good to have an advanced life care plan. And that's through www.touchstone.
Could they find it on your website or ask on your website?
Yeah, and I've shared it on my Crossings page. Oh gosh, Touchstone Life Care, I think it is .com. But also, if you Google Advanced Life Care Plan, it will come up.
Yeah.
There's several different ones available. It deals with what it is that you want at the end of life, and what is it that is quality of life for you, because quality of life is something different for everyone. And so if you have a stroke and you can suddenly no longer speak for yourself, there needs to be someone there who will speak for you. And if you don't have an advanced life care plan, then they may not know what it is that is acceptable for you and how far you will go. Do you want to be intubated? Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want to be artificially fed? And do you want to be on a breathing machine? All those things are very important.
And if no one knows about it, like, how is it going to be implemented if you don't know about it?
That's right.
So this is a way that you can let your family, your loved ones know exactly how you want it to be.
Yes, and then you need to share that with the people who will speak for you, and you need to inform your GP as well. And if you have got indeed a terminal illness, you need to let your oncologist know, or any other specialist. Not everyone's got cancer, it doesn't have to be the oncologist. But and in that way you have much more of a chance to be treated in the way you want. Of course, the moment you're in hospital and you don't have that advanced care plan, the doctors have to make the decision for you, and they will choose to fight for your life no matter what, because that's their job. And so they have the responsibility to save your life. And
So it's important to get the care plan.
Yeah. Advanced care plan. It's lots of different advanced care plan, advanced life care plan, advanced care directive. There's one from the government. I like the Touchstone one, and the Touchstone one is designed by a doctor called Maren Cooper. And so Touchstone Maren Cooper will certainly get you there. She has seen a lot of deaths in hospital and was quite appalled by how these deaths happen, and feels that we can do it in a better way. And she set up this Touchstone life care plan. And so you can fill it out online. It literally takes 20 minutes, and then you can share.
And everyone should be doing it.
Really?
Everyone.
Yes. And not just when you're terminally ill, because, you know, I get a lot of sudden deaths as well, and people with heart attacks or strokes, and they may live another week or two and then eventually indeed die. it's good to have these plans in place. Accidents happen all the time, car accidents. You know, what is it that you want to risk? Do you want to risk waking up and not being able to move and those kind of things you need, your family needs to know what it is.
Well, it's a bit late to, well, it's a bit hard for someone to actually converse and get that out there. They could be thinking that, but not actually be able to let you know. So good to do it previously.
Yes, yeah.
So just to have it there in case of.
Yeah, and let people know, you know, flick that through an email. There's an email that you can, there's email addresses, as many as you want, to pass your plan on to people.
Ah, so you can put,
Yeah.
that's a great idea then.
It's the touchstone one is really well designed, so it's fantastic.
Okay, that's your recommendation.
My recommendation.
So each week when I have a guest on the show, I always ask them to give like a message of hope or a message that you would find, you know, that would help someone out there. So would it be, could you leave a message to my viewers on like something that you find important about what you do, or something that you think is important that they should do at the time of death, or you know, just a little message that you could give them?
To embrace that part of life as much as you've embraced the start of life and life itself. And when someone dies, when one of your loved ones die, to pick up the kettle, not the phone, and to give that time. It's become some sort of a saying in the death doula realm, in the death midwives realm. Pick up the kettle, not the phone. Give it time, have a cup of tea and sit and feel into what it is that your next step might need to be.
Good advice. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you.
And each and every night we have beautiful people that join in with us, and I'll just mention a couple of the names. Thank you, Colleen Dandelion. Like, thank you, and I've seen you a couple of times when I've been out, so thank you, Colleen. Debbie O'Donoghue, Michelle Douglas, thank you, Michelle. Samantha Shane, Vicky Louise Williams, hi Vic, Cherie Britton, Claire Reid, Susie Giorgino, Karina Dendel, thank you, and Georgina Harry, thank you so much. We've got Joanne Haskew as well, thank you Joanne, Lainey Jarrett, Philip Barrington, thank you Phil, Louise Melrose Hanley, Ellen Kachukas, Shireen Lowe, thank you in Brisbane, and Joanne Haskew, thank you, and Karen Humphreys. Thank you. There are some of the beautiful people that are out there every week just watching and listening to what we have to say. And yeah, we've got a great following. We have got a really incredible following.
More coming.
Oh, we've got Hemi Modi, thank you. And Christy Quinn, thank you. Thank you, India, for opening up your hearts to me and loving what I do and accept me and what I do each and every week. So thank you, India. Being India the country. I know there's so many little girls running around called India these days. So thank you so much, everyone, for supporting my dream, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Oh, no, you're going to be okay.